was almost designed to lose money just so we could get as much money in as possible. A lot of these projects I'm doing for other people as a fee-based developer is they'll send me a parcel with a 20-unit building and maybe some space in the back and some tuck under parking, and we can add 8, 9, 10, 14, 20 units to these using the accessory dwelling unit pathway.
So I'm curious, what regulations sound good but are actually hurting the housing crisis?
I think rent control is definitely something that's becoming more and more aggressive, and just cause ordinances. And I think that's going to show that it's not going to work the way that it's intended to work. Personally, with my own portfolio, I didn't realize when I first did this, when you're able to add multifamily ADUs, I took a duplex and added 2 units to it. And by adding 2 detached ADUs to it, I was no longer able to fit under FHA or Fannie or Freddie guidelines. And it has been, still to this day, a struggle.
How do skyrises get bought and acquired, but they don't actually make any money? Like, how does that happen?
That was corruption.
Wow, really? Yeah. Did you have any knowledge on that?
I do, yeah.
We all get the same 24 hours. So why is it that some people build so much more with them? I'm Brian Coons, and this is the Builder Nation podcast, where we talk to top performers, entrepreneurs, and visionaries to uncover the architecture of a meaningful and fulfilling life. Let's get into it.
Welcome back to another episode of the Builder Nation podcast. Today we have a man with 700 plus units in plan check who is killing it and crushing the game in real estate development at a large scale in one of the highest regulated legislative markets, and along with an area that has suffered a huge loss in terms of housing from some fires that have happened. And I'm excited to dive into today with my guy, Andrew Slocum. He is living it and breathing it every single day, trying to truly help the housing crisis. So I would love to talk to you today. What actually has happened on the ground with these fires?
First of all, hey, Brian. Hi, everyone listening. Thanks for having me. I've been watching the podcast, watching the journey, man. I'm really excited to be here. So thanks for having me. I am working on a lot of projects for other people in Altadena, as well as have a fund that we've raised money for people that want to sell and just can't move forward in Altadena. And the number one question I get asked is, I heard LA City and there's no permits. Is it the same for Altadena? Is it the same for LA County? And as someone who's worked in LA County before, I always tell people, before the fires, I wasn't sure if the people that worked in LA County were human or not. They were able to walk extremely slow. They breathed very slow. Like, their ability to move very slow was almost unhuman. It was incredible the way that they could operate. And so I thought, like, how are they going to be able to build 7,000 homes when they couldn't do anything like regularly? But that experience has been completely different. One thing they did, and I think a lot of, LA City did the same thing, is have this one-stop shop. But what LA County really did is they specifically put a team together for these fire rebuilds. In the very beginning, there were plan checkers emailing me at 3 a.m. that had been working all day just to get stuff in there. They were working so hard, and I applaud the effort they did. I'm now getting planning corrections within a week of submittal. Building is the first project that I got approved, took 6 weeks in total. We're now looking at more like 3 months, but I mean, before it was 1.5 years, 2 years. So this improvement is just, it's so much better than what it was before. I cannot speak the same to LA City. But in LA County, they are working very hard. The process is changing. Like, there are some new fire requirements and it's evolving, and you get some new things as you go in there, but there is communication. You can get in front of people. If you go to the one-stop shop in person, there are people there that will do whatever it takes to get you to the next stage.
That is super interesting. Why do you think that timelines are so different from city to city?
Leadership. I would say leadership. There are, I doubt she'll ever see this, but there's a person at LA County at the one-stop shop, Stephanie, and she's just like a person that gets things done. And there are more people in LA County that have decided, we're not going to let obstacles get in the way and point to this department or point to that department. We're going to collaborate together and go to the next step. And that's where the timelines really improve, because when you don't have communication between departments or anyone, you spend weeks or time just to get anyone to talk to each other, when really it could be as easy as one person emailing the next person and then there you go, or talking to each other. So I would say the difference is there is a collaborative effort of people wanting to get this done versus just saying, you got to talk to them. Good luck.
That's so true. I've seen so many times where everyone just wants to shift the blame to somebody else. And so anytime that there's something wrong with the project or they have feedback, so often, I mean, I've seen it on a bunch of my projects, is like they'll send review comments and then they'll have to wait till everyone else finishes their review comments. Then they'll send it back. You have to look at it, and then you look at it and you're like, you could have just solved that in an email to your, or like walk down the hallway. That makes a lot of sense, that's a huge issue.
It seems so simple, but it is. I'm living and breathing, watching it. Like, we're in LA City, they don't talk to each other, and then you have this miscommunication there. They just talk to each other, and it's really making it different.
That's amazing. So with the fires, I mean, what do you think? Where do you think cities have failed before, and where are they failing now or succeeding now, based on the changes of the fire situation?
I think setting up individual teams has showed to be a success. And I think being able to compartmentalize it even smaller is something that cities have failed to do, because they'll have a region, but these regions in LA, County, LA City are massive. And so I think a compartmentalization of making like people that are dedicated to certain things, and that they work together and they know each other and they're allowed to talk to each other. I am not sure they're not allowed to talk to each other, but as you've seen, it sure feels like, there's like this firewall in between them, and it's like some unspoken rule that they'll be like arrested if they talk to each other, because they resist it to such a high level. It doesn't make any sense. But this open dialogue, and job captains. I'm doing some affordable housing, and the LA City has high, like, basically, if you do this 100% affordable project, you get a job captain. And you reach out for this job captain, and they go to the places that you're having these issues and talk on your behalf. Something like that would be very helpful, even for smaller projects, because they just take just as long as the larger projects. Sometimes it's not that big of a difference when you're talking about a 51 unit project or a duplex. They could easily take the same amount of time or longer. So another thing that they failed, but they can do, is implement like a captain that helps you go along the way, instead of keeping everything compartmentalized and separated, and it's up to the owner, developer, applicant to reach out to everyone and get this conversation going.
So you're saying almost like a permit runner that's dedicated to your project inside of the city.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And you're seeing that for like larger projects right now, or is that something that you just wish would happen?
No, in the city of LA, they do have that for any project that was under the executive directive one, the 100% affordable streamline process. So they've used it and it works. It just isn't for everything. It's only for that one type of project.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, I think that would be a great thing to add. I mean, I think they put it on the developers, and everyone says like developers pay for development, and it's very true, because they're just stuck at, they have to spend all the money. The city, the way I make the joke, I'm like, the city gets paid minimum wage and they go home at 5, whether you're in a rush or not. Like, they don't care.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think putting somebody in charge to kind of be the liaison is probably an extremely valuable thing for these larger projects that's inside of the city.
Yeah, I think any size of project would be helpful, just because you have this interdepartmental conversation. When you're having a LA County email or LA City email, it can be dealt with much differently. And they start to learn the process as well, so they know how to navigate through these issues. So someone that may not be as experienced as you and I, and can relay that message, versus when you have the applicant going directly to it. Not everybody's done as many projects as we have. So they maybe don't know, they may not be asking the right question, and they may be wasting time because they're just asking these questions that really aren't relevant to what needs to actually be done.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So since the fires in Altadena and LA City and LA County, since those fires, what has permanently changed in the housing crisis?
I think right away you saw a lot of people moving into new areas, and like a demand that shifted, because you had a lot of homeowners now becoming apartment renters. And what I saw in the very beginning is people like, these are the rents we have to pay, or wow, I can't believe that there's nowhere to rent. And like, you kind of have been blocking us from building everything. Yeah, it's interesting. You're now seeing this issue. I'm rebuilding a home for someone, good friend of mine. I started in real estate with him, in Pasadena, and he always was opposed of ADUs and other units and like development. He was a NIMBY. He was a NIMBY. And then when he had to go find a place, he's like, I can't believe it's so much. Or why don't we build housing? I'm like scratching my head. I'm like, because of you, man. Like you're part of the problem. Like this exists. And so people saw what was really going on because they were living in their own world of their own home. So I thought that was very interesting. A year later, we'll see if they still like if it changes back when they get theirs again. But I thought that was really interesting to see that change and that awareness of a world that they weren't aware of.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I haven't really thought about that, but yeah, this fire displacement situation for these people who have had, I don't want to say a luxury because obviously everyone's kind of worked for it, but an ability to live in a home for an extended period of time, and that's their home. They have their mortgage from 1972 that they paid
Right.
paid a firm handshake and a pack of strawberries for.
Their tax basis.
And their tax basis is crazy low. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And now that it kind of shows this other side of the coin where it's like it hopefully, if nothing else, gives a little bit of empathy for these other people that maybe don't have the income of 40, 50 years of a job. They're 20, 30 years old and they're trying to just live there, just live in the area. And yeah, I can definitely see that hopefully has at least opened some eyes in that area. Do you think it's been pervasive past that or just kind of like local to the people that just had to move directly?
I think it was very localized to that, but then it also, other people who were just looking for a place to live now are competing against people that needed something. They was getting insurance payouts, so they were even like saying, "We'll pay more than what you're asking for." And so there was this supply and demand that was offset because you had, the market typically a vacancy and a few people here and there looking for a place. You don't usually have an influx of thousands of people that need somewhere to live today because they have nowhere to go. They're
Right.
essentially homeless, like literally homeless because it's gone. I saw that happen. I think that's finally like settling now, but also a year later, those rental payments are starting to go away. The insurance said we'll pay you rent for a year because they didn't know the timeline of getting. They thought, you design a home, you go to the planning office and you get it stamped in 24 hours and you build a home, and that exists in some places, but not here. Not here.
Yeah. So what do you think is hurting the rebuilding process the most in Altadena?
I would say a little bit of the sophistication of people who were submitting plans, and that the county was reviewing everything instead of doing maybe a completeness check and saying like, you don't have structural plans. I can't do a building check without it. They were doing comments without some of the things. I think they fixed that now, and so that was something that was really backlogging projects because they were doing plan check reviews without structural plans or without Title 24. So you absolutely would need to do another round of submittals and another because you're missing the key parts. And so it just created more and more churn because you aren't reviewing a full set of plans. So they fixed that. I think that is something that I'm seeing now is like, if you don't have structural plans, you're not getting a plan check as it should be. I mean, I don't see why you would get a full plan check without the plans of how you built the house.
That would make a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've had, maybe you've had a similar experience. I've had a couple people reach out to me who have these almost like container homes and these prefab units that they are just sitting on a lot. And they've said that there's been some legislative allowances in those areas for expedited ways to get units on. Have you seen any of these changes for putting these like prefab or these outside of state prefabricated homes just to help solve the housing crisis at all over there?
Well, I was a sponsor for AB 818, which expedited the like a factory built housing. And so that should take effect January 1st. But yeah, they are supposed to be expedited, I think. And I've never done one. I've done a container home in Joshua Tree. I have one that I never permitted in the middle of the desert in Johnson Valley. And so I wouldn't be able to speak very much on it. The reason I did 818 was to help like give options that could move quickly. And I think that is an option. But one thing I saw with that is that almost like we were talking about before, the delays may end up coming from a utility company or outside sources that are not connected with the building plan check. So yeah, you might be able to deliver a house quickly, but you might not get SoCal Gas to respond, which we're having problems with. You definitely may not get Edison to respond or do their work in a timely manner. So now you have a house there, but you don't have power, you don't have gas. It's sat on a foundation, and it's kind of, it's shelter, but it's not really usable shelter. And that is something we haven't been able to really figure out yet, is how to hold utility companies responsible or to a timeline. I mean, I think Edison admitted they burned the city down. Like, holding them responsible to rebuilding it on a timeline, you would think would be something we would do, but we're not there yet.
That's so wild. And yeah, I mean, that's helpful, because I think that there's a lot of questions on, how we get more and more housing into one spot, but I think it's just systemic of all the issues that everyone has seen up to this point. And that's why having people like you, like me, who are they're trying to like make, build units and do what we can, get good at the process so we can push them through as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. But it's still, I mean, yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of, even with clearly like of an issue where even NIMBYs are the ones who are like, I need housing. There's still just so much red tape that, tries to stop developers, it stops housing. And it's just so funny because so many people, I think, just think that it slows it down. But I think that there's deeper damage behind, the system, right? So, I mean, so I'm curious, what regulations sound good but are actually hurting the housing crisis?
I think rent control is definitely something that's becoming more and more aggressive, and just cause ordinances. And I think that's going to show that it's not going to work the way that it's intended to work. We see in New York thousands of units being held off the market because it's unaffordable to even operate them, because say the rent is that X amount of dollars, but then to operate it is more than that. No one, even nonprofits, are able to work at a loss indefinitely. We saw Skid Row Housing Trust lose their whole portfolio of housing because they couldn't operate at a negative. So I think that is something that we're seeing being pushed forward. It sounds good in theory. Who doesn't want to have their rent, like, not just a crazy increase? It sounds really good. But when you think of a larger timeline, when you think of what this really results in, and you think on a bigger picture, it's not good. I think there's a Senate Bill 8 and replacement units where it's a one size fits all. So say you tear down a duplex to make 4 units. Well, if one of those has to be at an extremely low income, you just can't build anything at all, because it just doesn't make sense financially. And I think people will say, oh, well, the developer's not going to make as much. You can't get a loan. You can't pay for these things if it's not going to make money. It's like, it just doesn't happen. It's not just the developer, it's everybody involved in this process. I mean, we have 3 high rises that are not fully built in downtown LA because it was never going to make money, and it stopped. The ocean-wide development was going to lose money, and yet it was being paid for. But then when there was a problem, now no one wants it because it was going to lose money. We can't have projects that don't hold themselves up or make a profit. A bank won't even give you any money. So I think many people need to also understand, like, things have to carry themselves or be profitable for anyone involved to do it, not just the developer.
That's a good question. So like, how do sky rises get built, or how do sky rises get bought and acquired, but they don't actually make any money? Like, how does that happen?
That was corruption.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Do you have any knowledge on that, or you dive into?
I do. Yeah. I mean, the council member's in jail now because he took bribes, and the planning and land use management has a huge influx of power, and it opens up the ability for people to make decisions that are not great decisions. And the developer needed to bring money into this country because where they were before, they couldn't get a return on their money. So even losing a large amount of money is fine because now you can make money with the money you can get in. But that stopped. And then the project is not profitable for anyone else because it was going to lose money. It was almost designed to lose money just so we could get as much money in as possible. And I say we, the developer. And so now no one wants it because it was a loss. It always was a loss. It was planned that way. So, I mean, you speak of like, how do we avoid it? I mean, corruption being a part that no one ever wants to happen, and it's not something you plan for. But if that wasn't involved, I think there would have been more checklists and due diligence on who was paying for it and that it would get completed. which other projects around it went through. This one did.
Hey guys, if you're a business owner, high income earner, or investor who's been thinking about getting into real estate development but don't have the time to manage the process, this is for you. My company partners with people like you to help unlock the potential of your properties or even source and manage new small scale development projects. We manage hundreds of ADUs and infill development projects across Southern California, and our team knows how to simplify the process so you can benefit from the upside without managing contractors, permits, or design headaches. Whether you want to develop your own property, explore ways to offset taxes, or just learn how the development model works, head to thebuildernation.com/partner. That's thebuildernation.com/partner and see how we can help you build more with the same 24 hours. Now back to the show.
That's crazy. That makes so much sense too, because I think that, I talk about I have a lot of people who ask, like, how can someone pay this much for this property? Right? It doesn't matter if it's a single family, a duplex, a 20 unit, 100 unit, it doesn't matter. And I always tell them, like, people play different games. Some of them seemingly are games that maybe shouldn't be played, or, are not playing by the appropriate rules. But yeah, I mean, some people, like, they'll take a 2% cash on cash return to save 25% in taxes on a yearly
For sure.
basis. And so that's just at the nth degree. That's kind of what that sounds like, is just people playing different games.
Yeah, they wouldn't have got a return on their money if they stayed there. Maybe they get a 1%, but here they could get 20, 100, whatever it may be, a much bigger return. So it's okay to lose some for the bigger picture of what we could gain. And we don't always know. I always used to think that too. Like, how is someone offering this price? Why am I losing to this? Like, who wants that? But I'm trying to hit a much larger metric than what they are, because they have something else they need. So we don't always know what someone is like, what their end goal is.
Yeah, it's a very wild game, especially in development, because it is. You can have people that are, extremely sophisticated and extremely operationally sound and experienced, and then you have other people that eventually, I notice a lot of people that I know, at least, who make a lot of money or who have made money in other avenues of life. Eventually, they get into real estate, and almost every single one that I've seen that really is like, has been in it now and is in the game, they almost all move into development.
Huh.
Like, that seems to be the thing. I mean, have you seen something similar?
I have. There's a guy who, Dan Gatsby Investments, and he just wanted to be a syndicator. He just wanted to raise money and syndicate, and then he's like, I can't find someone to do this, can't find people to do it. And he has the responsibility of making sure the money gets a return. So, like, you almost end up becoming a developer because you have to be aware of all the process. And how else do you do that unless you become the guy that does all of it? So I've definitely seen how people don't want to do it, but they found, like, we have to, because how difficult it is. We have to control all that. Otherwise, it's going to fall apart. And then the people who take the money, the syndicator, whoever it is, the LP, they're the ones who has the responsibility to give a return. So you can't give that guarantee without controlling the process. So yeah, absolutely. You want to not be the developer, and you find your way becoming more and more the developer, because you have to be in control of it to make it successful.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point, because I think that, when you look at any investment strategy, whether it be Airbnb, hotel investing, flipping, small multifamily or large multifamily value add, all of those are really just pieces of the development process.
Mm-hmm.
So they're all just individual pieces of, you're renovating units, you're renting them out, you're managing the assets of the property. Development is just, you're just starting a little bit earlier in the process.
Hey,
Like,
right.
that's all it is. And so
That's
it's just
all it is.
like you're saying, you're just controlling all the pieces you would be, but you're doing the last piece that most people, it's the hardest, it's the most difficult, it takes the most time, and it's the least cash flow heavy, getting it to that point. And so it's harder to do, but by doing that, you create the most value, and you're able to extract the most value from it, and also solve a problem. Like, yes, we need nice housing, we need fixed up housing, which is a huge part of it, but also we need more. We just need more housing.
Yeah, of all types. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess for you, I mean, what is kind of where are you at in your journey? I know we talked about it a little bit. If you have over 700 units going through the process right now, like, what does that look like for you? How have you gotten to that point?
Yeah, when most of these are multifamily accessory dwelling units. So an existing multifamily building, we're adding more units to something that's already there. New construction with existing construction. A few years ago, you were only allowed 2 detached units. Well, that got changed to now it's up to 8 units under SB 1211, plus a 25% of conversion if you have tuck under garages or space that isn't livable space. So a lot of these projects I'm doing for other people as a fee-based developer is they'll send me a parcel with a 20 unit building and maybe some space in the back and some tuck under parking. And we can add 8, 9, 10, 14, 20 units to these using the accessory dwelling unit pathway. It's just as hard as any other development. It actually, the conversions are even harder because with a blank slate, you're just, you're painting a picture on a blank canvas. But when you're talking about an existing building that has plumbing lines and a foundation and a building here and tenants above it, like it's a lot more difficult to navigate that than if you were just building a building from the dirt. And so we are adding housing to an existing stock without having to pay the land basis again, which makes for an incredible return on investment and sometimes almost doubling the basis of units there, which is incredible without having to pay for the land. And so some of the groups I'm working with are private equity that have brought larger amounts of capital that wasn't really seen before, because at 2 units, it wasn't enough to really to get the returns or even to deploy the capital that needed to. But then groups that have got lines of credit for 100 million can find enough projects and do enough with each one to where it actually gets exciting, and it's where it's a deployment or a check size that now you can start doing it. So for instance, I have a project that has 7 parcels all together. They bought basically the whole side of a street, and each one was a 4-unit building. So they're adding 4 units to every single one of those. And it's kind of, even though it's separate projects, it's viewed as one. And so you have 7 times 4, that's how many detached units they're adding. And that's almost like a brand new building, but they have the existing units cash flowing. They are, and then they just add the new units to them because they're detached. They're exempt from rent control. They're exempt from these things under Costa-Hawkins. So you have brand new buildings. I think I also like to, say the downside of things. We're not quite sure how things are going to work out when you have an existing building and then a new building. Like they're definitely 2 different vintages mixing together, So what the valuation's going to look like and how that's going to be, it's going to be interesting. But as on a cash flow basis, you make such a great yield by adding almost, if you're doubling the basis without having to buy the land again, you can get maybe a little bit lesser of a valuation between the two, the new and the old, because there's such a huge spread there. And we're designing these in a way that we're avoiding commercial buildings. So we're not building them as apartments. We're building them as multiple duplexes. It's annoying and sad, but for anyone that doesn't know, there's an occupancy. A duplex is R3 occupancy. Anything more than that, like 3 to whatever it could be, is R2 occupancy, which falls under commercial building code. And I like to say it's like 30 to 40% longer and 30 to 40% more expensive to build because you have multiple people involved in this process. So you'll have an inspector, a commercial plumbing inspector, mechanical, all these other people that are involved in it all have to agree with each other and show up. Same thing with plan checkers. When you're under the commercial occupancy, you have a mechanical plan checker, electrical. You have all these different people that are now involved and don't play with each other, which we talked about in the beginning. But if you stick with R3 occupancy, you have 1 plan checker and you have 1 inspector. And if they don't agree with you, that's great because it's just 1 guy. It's not other people disagreeing with you and disagreeing with each other. And so what we've done is we've used these 8, like if we're adding 8 units, they're all individual duplexes on one site. And they're sticking with that occupancy because we know as developers what that problem looks like and we're avoiding those problems.
Yep. It's so funny. That's exactly what our models turned into over the years. Is I've have an 11 unit, an 8 unit, some 5 units and stuff going up here, all R2, and everything we do now is R3 because of that exact reason. I joke too because everyone asks what the difference is, and I'm like basically there's more people living there, so there's more likelihood that somebody's going to set the place on fire, and that's what all these implications are. It's just fire safety, it's ability to make sure that literally it makes it harder for people to burn it down, fire sprinklers, all that stuff. That's so funny. Have you, with building a bunch of these projects, have you noticed any struggle to sell the buildings with ADUs versus selling something else?
I have personally with my own portfolio. I didn't realize when I first did this, when you're able to add multifamily ADUs, I took a duplex and added 2 units to it. And by adding 2 detached ADUs to it, I was no longer able to fit under FHA or Fannie or Freddie guidelines. And so no one could get a loan unless they were doing like a DSCR or some other type of loan. And most people who were looking for a fourplex were going to house hack or something like that. And they weren't capable of getting this kind of loan or didn't have the down payment. And it has been still to this day a struggle. If I want to sell some of these units, which I'm trying to sell them, is that no one can qualify, or the people that can qualify, they don't want to buy a 4-unit building. If they can qualify for like this type of loan, they want something much larger than that, maybe a 20-unit building. So from my understanding, and I'm definitely not the one to really like know this, but it sounds like Fannie and Freddie have released new guidelines that should take effect January 1st, like the 3.6, I think is what it is, guidelines. And so now multiple ADUs can be used, where it was specifically said, if you have more than one, we can't, you're out of luck. No, the answer is just no. Now the answer is yes, we can do it because they're being treated like, a single family home could have 3 ADUs. It's actually not unheard of. It's permissive, and it has been for a little bit of time. So I have seen, and we'll see if it actually works, or that people get educated with these things, because that's a problem with rule changes. I'm sure you've seen this. It's like now you have to actually educate the guy who's supposed to know about this stuff, because no one trains anyone.
Yep, that's very accurate. Yeah. The way that we've, our model has definitely shifted away from the larger multifamily towards these smaller builds, generally ending up, when we can, below 4 units, because the lending standards have changed for sure. And it is difficult when you have multiple ADUs on something that's 4 units or less. When it's above 4, like it's just DSCR based. It's fairly easy, but it's these 4 and under that's the issue. And something that is cool about it that we've noticed is the allowable debt you can get on it for DSCR is actually a lot more liberal with the 1 to 4 unit space. So where you would have a 1.2 DSCR loan on a 5+ unit, we've actually gotten like 1.0 with interest only DSCR on these 4 unit and below projects. So it still nets probably a little bit less loan amount than in just like an 80% loan, but it is significantly higher because you don't have as much cash flow. So it kind of like, it does make it a little bit easier to hold on to some of these things. Selling is still a little bit more where the demographic I've noticed is actually not generally towards this like owner occupied type person. It either is somebody who's like savvy enough, they work at like Qualcomm. Like I have one that we got an offer from someone who had $1 million. He wanted to put it down. He was savvy enough to know that like buying multiple units is better than buying a single family home and living there. But generally that's kind of like one demographic, or the other one in this like 4 unit ish realm around the $2 to probably $2.5 million mark is kind of perfect for people moving up from like a condo or a single family that they're 1031ing. So that's the other demographic we found is very valuable for these projects. Have you seen something similar?
I mean, I just have an offer for a building I'm selling from someone 1031ing into it. They're selling their condo, and they're like, well, I'm going to buy a house, but this was a condo. What do I put my money into it? So yeah, I mean, I didn't realize that was who the buyer pool was. Most of who I saw before was someone who wanted to live in one of the units and collect income from the other 3 as like maybe their first property. They were a renter before, and they're like, oh, I can't really get the home I want. So instead of just continuously being a renter, I'm going to be an owner, and then also collect the rent and being able to do it that way until maybe I can buy the home I want, or whatever that may look like.
Yeah, that's exactly what I've noticed. It's those people that, they've been renters, or like I said, they're people who work at Qualcomm. They're very high income earners. They have a decent amount of money saved up, because that's the difference is even though they want to live there, it's harder to get a full, you can't use the income of the other ADUs to qualify for. So there's only a certain amount of loan amount that you can get on it, because it's now you don't have the 4 unit income thresholds. You have like the 1 unit or the 2 unit. So yeah, they have to come down with a lot more money, but they're still there. But yeah, that's definitely for us. I think that's who we kind of build for, is that like savvy person, or like the person that just wants the turnkey unit and they're happy with making a little bit of money. They're not trying to crush it and add all the value, but they know that like, hey, this is just a place to put capital because I'm making a lot of money, and I'm going to sit on this for 10, 15 years, because if it's a smaller, less dense project, probably in a better neighborhood as well in a lot of cases. So they're like, I just want to sit on this, hold it for years and years, and look back and be like, cool, I just made 3 million, 4 million bucks doing nothing.
Correct. Yeah. They
So
don't want to be the developer. They don't want to do all of that work. They're like, actually probably smarter than we are as developers because,
arguably, they make cash flow way quicker than we do. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But no, that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, so moving from there, right? Like, so you've had you have a great business, right? Like you're very clearly in the space, both from the legislative side and from the construction side. So you have some pretty big projects, not just, it's not just 700 single family homes. Like, take me through, you just mentioned you got a term sheet for a 5% construction loan on 51 units. Like, take me through that.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think you have to realize as a developer, sometimes you don't always want it. Like, it's good to be first, but sometimes you ride the wave of what the city wants because they might help you instead of being in the way. I brought up Executive Directive 1, which was a 100% affordable streamlining bill that the mayor enacted, and our group looked at that and thought, okay, let's find a site and do that. So we bought a dilapidated vacant duplex that we realized, because of the general plan use, not the zoning, it would qualify for these incentives in these state laws. So we bought it for like 680,000 and then entitled it and got it permitted for 51 units. We could have maybe done more units, but because we ended up going with no parking, but we selected the site in an area that was across the street from a school that had an entire width of a school with an open street. So the site itself yields to hundreds of parking spots that aren't used ever. So yes, there'll be street cars on the street, but we really try to build housing for people, not cars. So we weren't super concerned about the cars, but we still understand like people will have a car. We aren't confused by that. So we bought it knowing that people who had a car or needed one still has access to that, and took it all the way through to get it permitted, and then found an equity partner. So we partnered with Better Angels, a guy named Adam Miller, who had a huge exit to Amazon, sold his company to Jeff Bezos. And it's kind of funny, he sold it to Jeff Bezos. He wanted to be like Jeff Bezos' wife, like the Mackenzie of affordable housing. Like, that's what he wants to do with his life now. Like, he has more money than he really, doesn't have to fight for money anymore. One of the things he wants to do is become affordable housing and fix these problems. So he invested in us, invested in this project. So we found all the equity that we needed. And then we reached out to a debt broker to figure out who is lending on 100% affordable projects where you are deed restricted to the rent, who even understands who that is. So we got a term sheet from Self Help Credit Union. Coincidentally, this credit union does a lot of this, and that's who understands these things, is these smaller teams, not like a Chase Bank that maybe has an affordable team, but they understand tax credits. They understand LIHTC. It's not just a rich guy and a guy putting the scraps of money he has together to do a project, and there is no government subsidy. It's just regular capital. And so they gave us a term sheet at a very attractive construction loan rate. And then it also converts into a permanent loan. So we're covered for about 5 years. Then we would refinance out. So the idea of that is that it gets us stabilized to then we could go into a 40-year HUD loan or a more attractive loan, instead of having to figure out where they're going to get paid out and who's going to take out our construction loan. Do we get a bridge loan? It's almost like a bridge loan built into the loan itself. So then we could go into a more conventional loan that works for affordable housing.
Okay. Do you think that it's worth trying to subsidize development, or do you think subsidization of development works or doesn't work?
Well, in a way, you could say that streamlining the permitting process and paying for upgrades of power, which this program did, is a subsidy. I think that subsidy absolutely works. But then when you say subsidy in a tax credit standpoint, where units end up costing 700,000 to easily $1 million each, no, absolutely does not work. And I think that what it does is involve so much red tape and so much other processes where the money comes from that it starts to not make sense. If my building was funded, privately financed, instead of being, relatively 260,000 a unit, it could easily be $700 to $1 million a unit, just because the source of funds it changes to like a subsidy, a government, federal, state, whatever subsidy for the same exact building. So no, that makes no sense at all. It's not like it's much different. It's everything changes because of the paperwork you have to have, the licenses you have to have. My partner's a contractor. If someone's saying I'm going to build the same thing as a tax credit deal, it's 40% more. Just that's it. It's 40% more. Not because it's better materials or anything like that. It's all of the things we have to do to satisfy those requirements drive up the price. Same thing with the architecture, engineer. Everybody has to comply with this excess stuff, and it just makes it ridiculous.
That's crazy. Yeah. So, I mean, you're so clearly like in it. Like it's so clear. You have so many projects going on. You're active in all of the spaces fighting for the housing crisis. You mentioned something to me. You're actually suing the governor right now regarding a couple different issues. So can you take me through why you're suing the governor right now?
This came about because Senate Bill 9, which is like the boogeyman for people, especially NIMBYs, because it's actually like outdated. Where you could build a second unit, or you could split a lot. There's bills now like 684, 1123 where you could do 10 units. Like, oh, don't tell the NIMBYs this, but SB 9, it's the boogeyman. They're so scared that it's gonna change their neighborhood for whatever way. So the Palisades and the people there, for whatever reason, were very worried that people were going to build a second unit or split the lots, even though you could still build a second unit. It's called an ADU. They wanted ADUs, but they didn't want second units. They were able to reach out to the mayor, and the mayor called the governor, and the governor did an executive order stopping SB 9. But in my, and I'm not an attorney, and my non-legal opinion, I thought, how we voted and got Senate Bill 9 approved. How do these people that are like, in a certain area get to say, nah, not for us. Everybody else has to, but not for us during a housing crisis, especially in like a more affluent area. Just felt wrong to me. And also that worked for all of the fire areas. And one thing that really affected me working in Altadena is now that potentially meant that Altadena and the county could say not second units. That's important because you could build an ADU, yes, but ADUs are not valued the same as a duplex. And so you're robbing people of their equity, their insurance now after a fire is based on their equity. And so they're getting less insurance. There was just so many things that people were losing this right because a couple of people were like scared of a boogeyman rule that really wasn't affecting them. I mean, Pasadena banned it and there were 0 applications. They even asked in the city council meeting, and I showed up and I was the only one speaking against it. Like, does anyone know of anyone submitting an application? No. But the knee-jerk reaction was like, let's stop this thing instead of like, maybe an application comes in and let's see, like maybe they have to do it. Otherwise, they're going to lose their home. Maybe they have to split the lot and sell it to another person or they're going to lose their home. And the idea is like, whoa, too many people could live there. You could still build an ADU. The same amount of people are still going to be able to live there. So NIMBY Law reached out to me. And they asked if I want to be involved in a lawsuit, and here we are.
Wow, that's crazy, man. Okay, so as we finish this up, man, it's super clear that you are leading the charge for so many people in this development space, in this housing crisis. What does enough housing mean to you?
Oh man, I think enough means that there is housing of every type into a surplus where our vacancy rates are at a sustainable amount. Instead of like 2 or 3%. So unfortunately, it does drive down the rents. I say unfortunately because it makes it harder as an owner, but I think it's to where we start seeing a drop in rental prices and people can stay here instead of moving away. Like, it's such a complicated question. If I could think of a million different answers, but that's the one for me. As an owner in Long Beach, a city that is built tons of ADUs, my rents of the buildings I have are dropping. What I rented for $1,700 2 years ago is now $1,400. That's what it is. Why? Because we built enough housing. It really is a thing. I'm proof of seeing it happen with my own buildings. So enough is that there is options for people that want to stay here, that don't want to move to Texas, don't want to move to Florida, don't want to move to another country. There's enough housing to stay here.
That's an amazing answer. Andrew, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm excited to continue along the journey. If people want to follow along, if they have projects they want to work with you on, what's the best way to get in contact?
I mean, my Instagram, Andrew Slocum or Green Dev Co. is a good way to watch what we're doing and seeing it. My email, andrew@greendev.co. My phone number's 310-467-9329. Like I have a lot going on, but I do my best to do what I can. And if you have an apartment building and want to build some ADUs, or you have 100 apartment buildings and want to build a bunch of ADUs, like reach out to me. I'd love to work with you, help you raise capital, whatever it takes. Like let's build more housing.
I love it, man. Thanks so much for coming on today.
All right, thank you.
That's it for this episode of the Builder Nation podcast. If it gave you something to think about, hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's leveling up. Until next time, keep building.